As it's 6:31 and we have a quorum, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Bloomington Common Council to order here on February 19th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember, Rallo,
I am here.
Piedmont Smith,
Here.
Stossberg,
Here.
Daly,
Here.
Zulik,
Here.
Asari.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before I do the agenda summation, the first thing we're going to do is start with some interesting information with regard to diversity and equity and that kind of thing, and I'm going to turn that over to Councilmember Piedmont Smith for that tonight.
Yes. Today, February 19th, is the Japanese American Day of Remembrance. So I just wanted to read briefly from the Japanese American Citizens League website. February 19th is a significant date for the Japanese American community. On this date in 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which gave the U.S. Army the authority to remove civilians from the military zones that were established in Washington, Oregon, and California during World War II. This led to the forced removal and incarceration of some 120,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry living on the West Coast, who had to abandon their jobs, their homes, and their lives to be sent to one of 10 concentration camps scattered in desolate, remote regions of the country. No Japanese Americans were ever charged, much less convicted, of espionage or sabotage against the United States. Yet they were targeted, rounded up, and imprisoned for years simply for having the face of the enemy. Every February, the Japanese American community commemorates Executive Order 9066 as a reminder of the impact the incarceration experience has had on the families, communities, and on our country. It is an opportunity to educate others on the fragility of civil liberties in times of crisis and the importance of remaining vigilant in protecting the rights and freedoms of all. That's the end of my quote from the Japanese American Citizens League website. I will just add as a note that President Trump has expressed his intent to revive the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which is the same law that paved the way for Japanese American incarceration during World War II.
Thank you for that bit of history and current events. For the rest of our meeting, our agenda goes as follows. We will start with an approval of minutes. There are 3 sets of minutes listed on the agenda, but at the request of the clerk's office, we will be moving approval for 2 of those sets, the ones from October. That will be followed by reports, first from council members, where we will have a couple of items that we will need to vote on. And then we'll have a report from the mayor and city offices, from the city controller, Jessica McClellan, about CREED funds and the general state of 2024. Then we will have reports from council committees, of which I do not believe there are any. And lastly, in reports will be reports from the public, and that is the first period of public comment for items not on the agenda. After that, we will have appointments to boards and commissions, including the appointment to the Merit Commission and the creation of the Fiscal Committee and announcement of appointments to the Budget Task Force. That will be followed by legislation for first readings, where we will start with Appropriation Ordinance 2025-02 to appropriate from the opioid settlement funds for downtown outreach grants, and then Ordinance 2025-08, where that will be an ordinance reestablishing the Cumulative Capital Development Fund. Then we will have legislation for second readings and resolutions. First, we have Ordinance 2025-05, amending various parts of Title II, Boards and Commissions. And then we'll have Resolution 2025-02 to update the interview standing committees of the council. Then we'll have additional public comment. That's another period for the public to comment on items not on our agenda. And then we'll have a couple of notes about council schedule and adjournment. So let's go ahead and we can start with those minutes.
I have the updated list of minutes for this evening. I move that minutes from October 1st, 2024, and October 30th, 2024 be adopted.
Thank you, and I'll just note that those October 30th minutes, the most updated version of that was sent out this afternoon, and that is the document for approval. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes? We're all in person, so all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion passes. Next, on to reports from council members. I'll start on my left tonight. Councilmember Asari.
Just two super brief reports. And sorry, I should have structured my thoughts a little bit better. But we had a meeting, but we didn't have a quorum, so we just had a discussion at the ESD yesterday. And I think Jane Cooper-Smith, Director Cooper-Smith, has sent around some notes to everyone about some potentially forthcoming resolution that will come to us by recommendation of the ESD should we vote on it. But there's two programs which are payment in lieu of tax programs, which sound quite similar to what we voted on last week, but actually these are for two low-income Section 8 houses that are owned by 501c3s that are essentially taking advantage of some tax advantages to reinvest that money into improving the property. And so you'll see those two pilots, they're coming together. There's some really interesting things about them I'm happy to answer any questions on if you see it, because I did get to hear a long presentation about them. But just generally, I think that is coming. I think the second thing, just again a general update, is there have been some discussions in the trades district around potential need to address some of the way that some of the plots were plated. Might need some for us to think about things like vacated alleys and things like that. Those are still in discussion, but again, that would come to us eventually. So just giving everybody general heads up about things that might be coming out of the economic development quarters. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that update. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Report, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Zulik.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Daley.
No report.
Okay, on the other end, Councilmember Ruff.
No report tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
Yeah, off the cuff, I was curious. There was a noon edition last Friday, had a show on the closing of Kirkwood, and my colleague Itzhak Asari was there and others. And it occurred to, after Councilmember Ruff and I had been discussing this, during our debate on the creation of the Transportation Commission a couple weeks ago, and we had discussion, kind of a mini discussion with corporate counsel about whether permanent changes in roadways were really within our domain of responsibility or our purview. And what I interpreted the corporate counsel to say is that it wasn't, that ultimately the decision was in the hands of the engineer, ultimately. That is to say, I suppose that we could have some influence and, maybe in the form of a resolution or a discussion about this, but ultimately the call is in the hands of the engineer. So I'm a bit confused as to why legislation continues coming to us, like the closure of Kirkwood, since the decision is ultimately up to the engineer. Now, I'm okay with that discussion, but I think I'm not sure if the responsibility falls onto council or to the mayor. It seems it falls onto the administration. And so I'd like a discussion about this sometime by council, maybe in one of our sessions where we discuss such things, as to whether that is unnecessary legislation and whether we should be more judicious about what we discuss and make it clear to people it's not in our It's not our responsibility, apparently. So, interested in further discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to start by talking just briefly about Resolution 2024-25, which requested that the Plan Commission revise the Unified Development Ordinance to add single-room occupancy as a residential use. This resolution was adopted by the Council on November 20th, 2024, and it said that the Plan Commission was instructed to prepare and submit an amendment to the UDO within 90 days from then, which is coming up, it's probably tomorrow, unless they're granted an additional extension of time. And I have discussed with Planning and Transportation staff that they are making some progress on it, but they would very much like to combine public notification of the SRO allowability with notification of other UDO changes that they have coming up, because certain changes require that all property owners be notified by mail, and so it's much more cost-effective to do that in one mailing rather than separate mailings. So I hereby move that we grant an extension of time, allowing another 90 days, so that the Plan Commission should submit to the Council a UDO amendment within 90 days of today.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to extend the deadline originally granted the Plan Commission through Resolution 2024-25. Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember, sorry.
But what are we extending it indefinitely, or are we putting?
She said 90 days, another 90 days. That was part of the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, I think probably we can do this by voice vote. Can we do this by voice vote? Okay, great. All those in favor of granting the extension, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Great. Thank you. That is extended, that deadline is extended for another 90 days from today.
Thank you.
Do you have additional?
I do.
Wonderful, go ahead.
I'm going to take advantage of my local pulpit here to speak just for a few minutes on national issues. Donald J. Trump's second term as president is basically destroying our democratic republic and is betraying our allies around the world. He has supposedly sworn to uphold the Constitution, as have all of we, but he is violating it in many ways, mostly by usurping powers that belong to the legislative branch. For example, he has frozen government spending approved by Congress and ignored court orders to unfreeze funds. He has closed the U.S. Agency for International Development, which he does not have executive authority to do since Congress approved a budget for the agency and passed a bill requiring such an agency back in 1961. He has issued an executive order denying birthright citizenship, which is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. He has illegally fired 17 inspectors general whose job it was to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in federal government, even though he claims to want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. He has instead created the Department of Government Efficiency and has given Elon Musk unprecedented powers as its leader, even though Musk's companies hold billion-dollar contracts with the federal government, an obvious conflict of interest. He has totally sold out our European allies to Russia. He has shown a blatant disrespect for the national sovereignty of Denmark, Panama, and even our biggest trading partner, Canada. He and his allies have condemned judges who try to uphold the legal limits of executive power, and his vice president has said that there are no such limits. As Judge John Kaunauer, who ruled in the case involving birthright citizenship, stated, and I quote, "It has become ever more apparent that, to our president, the rule of law is but an impediment to his policy goals. The rule of law is, according to him, something to navigate around or simply ignore, whether that be for political or personal gain." End quote. That was Adolf Hitler's attitude as well. I urge you to fight Donald Trump's agenda. Fight to uphold our Constitution, our democratic institutions, and our Republican form of government. We must continue to speak up and to speak out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I ditto all of that, and I appreciate your saying it, and I wish that I did not have my own report to give after that statement. But I do. I have a couple things. First, in your packet, I'll also start by the thing that we need to approve. So in the packet, there is a revised job description for our council attorney, and I would like us to officially approve that this evening. I am trying to find it in my packet because I highlighted some things. So the notable difference is it's in the section 3 paragraph. A paragraph was added to very explicitly give the council attorney, to delegate authority to the council attorney for hiring and supervision for the other employees in the council office. And this is kind of timely because Attorney Lehner didn't see where that delegation had ever been officially done, even though it is kind of part of that person's job to say hire and supervise the deputy attorney and the research assistant. And we have a vacant research assistant position right now. And so the Attorney Lehner would like to move ahead with that interview process. And then there were some small changes. Another thing that was changed had to do with the 24-hour on-call thing, which some people mentioned during the hiring process last year as kind of being problematic. And so that got changed to the incumbent may be called on to work evenings and/or weekends as necessary for time-sensitive completion of tasks and to address unforeseen complications, to kind of acknowledge that sometimes you need to work outside of the normal 40-hour work week as part of this position, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're on call 24/7 in terms of that kind of emergency in the middle of the night. So we made, and then there were a couple of other small changes. So to that end, I would like to move to approve the job description for our council administrator attorney as presented in the packet. Second. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that? Councilmember, sorry.
It's a question, but just general comment. Is that okay at this time?
Sure.
It might be useful for us to, I think, in addition to this, maybe just think about like a very brief letter, sort of indicating, some maybe priorities or things that we'd like to see reflected in the hire. I think that, delegating it, fantastic, but I'm just concerned too strong of a word, but I just think that because of the fact that we are a sort of decentralized body, sometimes it's, and our staff is centralized. It's, it is council staff, and sometimes I think it's, it's hard to determine exactly what those lines are, how we all interact with them, and so on and so forth. So just to, I think, just want to make sure that that sort of authority line remains clear and that we all have some say in sort of how the office continues to be shaped and formed. And I don't know what the best tool to do that is, but just thoughts for the good of the order.
Thank you. I will pass that on to Attorney Lehner. Okay. Great. Any other questions? Councilmember Zuluk.
I do think it would be helpful to have a conversation as a body on what the expectations for council staff are.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I'll say that that's one of those things that can be kind of challenging because of the nature of our meetings. They have to be public, and then we end up talking about our staff in public ways, and so that's not comfortable. Yes, Clerk Bolden.
I don't know if this is an appropriate moment to point out a change in the job description that as a member of the public, as a fellow elected official, blah, 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 I am a little concerned about. overall, because one of the things that it lists in the job descriptions under exercised responsibility is the ability to discipline subordinates and terminate employment after conferring with the president of the Common Council. And in exercising such authority, the incumbent shall utilize the city's policies and procedures then in effect in consultation with the Department of Human Resources. It just struck me that that's a great deal of authority just to the council president, whoever that may be at the time, even if it's in consultation with the Human Resources Department. And I understand that there may be a distaste for discussing these things in large meetings, but you also have executive sessions that are available to you. So it is something that I'm looking at and somewhat concerned about overall. And I don't know if other council members wanted to highlight that, because I don't actually see that as a small change, but it's something you all should at least talk about before you adopt it, in my opinion.
Are there comments or questions from people about that? Councilmember Daley.
I think Clerk Bolden brings up a really good point, and I agree. That's it. Me? Yeah, oh, sorry. I just said I think Clerk Bolden brought up a great point, and I think we should think about that.
Councilmember, sorry. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Thank you, Clerk Bolden, for pointing out that sentence. I don't see a problem with that. I think that the head of the council office, which is what this position is, needs to have the responsibilities and the supervisory discretion to handle their staff. And I think conferring with the president of council, I think I would trust whoever is president of council to notify colleagues if they see a problem with how the person in this position is handling their staff. So I don't see it as an issue. Thank you.
Councilmember Rallo.
I actually think maybe it bears some verbiage, because I think that operating as it is now, I would be totally trusting any of my colleagues who become president of the council, but we're going to be establishing a policy, and that could extend forward. And so perhaps this should be conferring with the president of the council, and it should reflect the will of the majority of the members, should be inserted as just a further check on that this is, because the person is working not only for council attorney, but for the entire council. So I just want to put that out there and see if anyone agrees. Thanks.
I just want to, as a point of reference, one of the reasons why that was put in there was so that the person in the position of administrator attorney had somebody that they could confer with. But if you, it goes down a rabbit hole of open door law. And so if they have to confer with everybody, then that could be a blockage. If they confer with nobody, then they could feel like an island. If you put in, say, the officers, then the officers might be acting like a committee, which we're not. And so it becomes a slippery slope. Councilmember, sorry.
Two quick thoughts on that. I think the one is that the tool that's available to us is executive sessions. I do tend to agree that there's an implicit structure here. Again, with us, it's, I think, okay. But again, I think to Councilmember Rallo's point is that you sort of precedents metastasize, right? They build on each other, and so, or fossilize, or whatever we want to say. The implied structure makes it as though the council attorney reports to and serves the president in ways that they do not the other council members. And that can create sometimes some things, where it's like, well, I don't, I told the president, and then the rest of us don't know. It just creates an interesting dynamic, or the potential for interesting dynamics in cases. So I do think that there's some warrant here to address that broader sense that we are all equal members of this body. The other thing I was going to say, though, is I do think that as much as we don't want to have conversations openly, again, we can use executive sessions. But I think there's one thing that maybe is, even in an open setting, worth us talking about, which is the ways that we might choose to limit ourselves in our interactions with council staff. So rather than talking about what we want from them or what we don't want from them, there is an element of how we, as individuals, are going to govern ourselves in our interactions with council staff, which I think is also, a conversation that maybe is more pertinent. But again, we can have executive sessions, I think, to have these type of discussions where necessary.
Clerk Bolden, do you have off the top of your head the way the state language about what's allowed in executive sessions?
So attorney on hand who can probably answer the question about that better than I should.
Okay.
Statute, one moment.
Okay. I think that when I've asked about that before, it's not necessarily been one of those things that's easy to do in executive sessions. And then I think there's concern about how timely feedback is able to, because if you're trying to assemble a quorum for an executive session and potentially short notice. And without Attorney Lanier here tonight, I'm hesitant to make too many changes on this, but I also know that one of the things that she wants to do sooner rather than later, and our next meeting is not until March 5th, is to interview for the temporary position that needs to be done. So, Councilmember Zook, do you have your hand up? I can't tell. Go ahead.
Thank you. I agree largely with a lot of what Councilmembers Rallo, Daly, and Asari said, but I guess I'll just add, I don't think it's a bad thing to have hard conversations in chambers. I think we're all publicly elected officials, and there are some times where it does get uncomfortable, but we can have hard conversations in front of people. And executive sessions are not our only tool.
Attorney Kulak, do you have that language up?
Yes, it
Thank you.
is in the open door law generally, just my computer won't go back to the actual section. Hold on. There are a lot of specific the IGA website is the way that it is. Hold on. All right, executive sessions. 514. Come on. 1.5. There we go. There we go. I had it highlighted. It includes, so there are several listed reasons to hold an executive session, and they may only be held in those following instances, one of which is to discuss job performance evaluations of individual employees. It does not apply to discussions of salaries, compensation, benefits, or of employees during a budget process, but job performance evaluations are an allowable reason to hold an executive closed-door session.
Okay. Thank you. What do people want to do right now in terms of of approval of this as it is right now? Should we just do a roll call vote on how it's written? Does anybody want to propose any kind of language change? Changing it right now does not preclude us from changing it again either. Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
Councilmember Asari, do you envision the input from the council being like a majority or a consensus or just simply a notification or discussion in an executive session? I think in consultation with colleagues, maybe could be added. The president in consultation with with his colleagues, their colleagues.
I would support that.
So how would that read exactly?
I don't have it in front of me, but essentially to include the council in consultation.
For any discipline or just termination?
I'm not sure. I think termination would be my primary concern. But I'm open to Councilmember Asari.
I think, and we're maybe, perhaps to me, the question to me that's like most pertinent and is that how we may govern our personal behavior based on information that we have or don't have. And so if for example, council staff was particularly stretched thin or, have a deadline, et cetera, and we don't have visibility on that, and it's that line only goes to the president. The challenge is like, how do we? It seems like an information sharing question, right? And so that's why I'm trying to put the onus on us, right? In the sense that, and you can sort of see the downstream things that might pursue that if Councilmember Rallo doesn't know that the staff attorney is on 20 projects or something like that, and then is saying I want something done for me, but then interprets that through the lens of it's because I'm not a privileged person or something. You see, so I think it's that question of just how do we make sure. But again, maybe this is not the tool to do it. I mean, it's maybe more of a discussion that we should be having, in a deliberation session or an executive session or something like that. Just thinking about how do we want to make sure that we govern ourselves, and I'm in some time later going to be introducing some amendments to Title II, which includes the proposal that we adopt like a rule book, and maybe this is the type of thing that you might have in the rule book, like how we want to govern ourselves in terms of how we relate with council staff and things like that. So, I'm quite okay with us voting for this as is now. We can make amendments later. I think we've had a good conversation to bring up some points, but I feel like the real pain point is sort of exist elsewhere than in the job description.
Okay. I would like to note that we've gone past 20 minutes for this section of the agenda, and I would like, if there are no objections, to extend this section of the agenda until 7:10. Okay, that's another 5 minutes, because I do have a couple of actual other reports from myself as well. Councilmember Rallo, I take that to heart. I think that we can modify this again, and I think that it could probably be pretty easily changed to discipline subordinates and then have another semicolon and then to terminate employment after conferring with Common Council. And so then the only conferring that actually happens is termination, but then we allow the council attorney to figure out discipline along with the HR guidelines independently. But if people feel comfortable voting on this as is right now and then potentially modifying it again to I think that would be the easiest thing to do in this moment, as long as people were okay with that. So, of course, people can always vote no. So we'll try it by voice vote, and if there's dissension, then we'll do a roll call vote. Okay? So all in favor of approving the job description for council administrator attorney as is, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Great. Thank you for that. And I'll pass these comments on to Attorney Lehner. Second, my actual report that I wanted to give, I wanted to take a minute to report on Plan Commission. We did have a meeting last week. The plan for the Monroe County Convention Center was passed, and there was also a long conversation about the resolution for UDO affordability amendments that we passed last year. So the Plan Commission is working on that. And Anna Killian Hansen, Director of HAND, gave a really comprehensive presentation about workforce housing and the AMI and that kind of stuff. So I encourage you guys to go back and watch that presentation. There's some slides with it too that were really interesting. And probably the Plan Commission response to that resolution that we passed will come back in two parts, because there were three sections of it. One of them had to do with just the changing the AMI numbers, and then one had to do with actually changing the incentives themselves. And so the Plan Commission feels like changing the AMI numbers is a little bit of an easier lift than the other, and so they're probably going to give that back to us in two parts. And then the last thing I want to say, Councilmember Rallo, I just wanted to, because you brought up the Title 15 concern and question, I at this point, my understanding after having met with attorneys about this is that there is not consensus around exactly what state code says and doesn't say about that authority, and that there's not necessarily agreement within state code about how that authority is, like one part, yes, gives it to the engineer, and another part potentially grants it to a local authority, but there is just more research that needs to be done in that arena. And so both our council attorney and city attorney Rice are collaborating and working together to dig into what exactly it says in terms of state code. And that's why we will continue at this point to receive legislation as pertains to our own local code, because Bloomington code, the city code, requires certain things to come through us. And so status quo will be maintained while that is getting sorted out. So I hope that that helps you out with that.
I appreciate your attention.
Sure. Okay, Councilmember Piedmont-Smith.
I have a question, if I may, Council President Strasburg.
Okay.
For the UDO affordability amendments, we passed that resolution the same night that we passed the one for the SROs, and I believe it had the same deadline, or did it have a longer deadline?
It didn't have a deadline at all.
Okay,
And
but
so
isn't the default deadline?
No, the default says, the default with the state deals with when Plan Commission has to first hear it, as opposed to when they actually have to return a document to us.
Okay.
So there's not actually state code that demands that Plan Commission return a document to us in a certain amount of time. So in theory, if we send a resolution, then they could just sit on it and never return it. But I mean, that's just in theory. That's not actually what our Plan Commission or Plan Department is going to do.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. All right, moving on to reports from the mayor and city offices. If Controller McClellan would like to take center stage here, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Controller McClellan. I am here to give you an update on what the CRED funding was spent on in 2024. So in 2023, the council and the controller's office transferred $17.3 million from the two CRED funds to the general fund. And then in the 2024 budget, in the 2024 budget, there were 5 departments that had a little over $12 million budgeted to them. Of that $12 million in 2024, $9.8 million was spent by those departments: ESD, Economic and Sustainable Development, Engineering, Planning, Street, and Parking. I asked all of the departments to give me a project name, a vendor, and amount for all of their expenditures from the CRED fund, and they provided me all of that information. I put all of that in your packet, and I'm happy to take back questions about those specific projects, but I'm really more here to report on the spending as the controller in very general terms, and to let you know that the remaining balance of that money is $7.5 million. That is in the general fund. It is legal to use it for any legal purpose of the city. This council has in the past desired to use it for the kind of projects that CRED was originally intended for, and I think that the city departments are happy to continue that practice. So what we see in the controller's office as the best way forward is to keep a hold of this balance, know what this balance of CRED funding is, which has not been difficult to do. It's a simple process. To report back to you from departments on what their suggestions are on how to continue to spend this money on eligible projects, and ask the council to either approve or not approve that spending. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Great. Are there any questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you for your report and all the details in our packet. That's appreciated. So how much was budgeted from CRED funds for this fiscal year, 2025?
None. We didn't specifically budget anything in CRED funds to be spent in 2025.
So is that remaining $7.5 million, is that somehow set apart and
No.
not being spent?
No, it is not set apart. It is part of the general fund balance. We can track when, if we want to call money from the general fund CRED money, we can. We can continue to keep this number 7.5 million and say of the general fund balance, 7.5 million is CRED money. Or we can let that 7.5 million will always be part of the general fund balance. So we could just say to departments, bring us your projects, and we will decide whether we want to fund them just based on the project, just based on what this city needs to do. We know what our general fund balance is. The council has chosen to sort of artificially restrict a little bit this portion of funding. We can continue to do that in a spreadsheet, but that money really is not held apart. It is part of the general fund. It is not in a separate fund. And it's really just artificially being held aside. As to those departments that use this money, of course, every department would love to know that this money is still sort of earmarked or restricted for their use and their use only. But essentially, it is just general fund money.
And can you remind us, and particularly for the public's benefit, what CRED stands for and what it was intended for?
I thought you might ask me that, and I had to look it up. So I am on a website from the state, the Economic Development Corporation website. CRED stands for Community Revitalization Enhancement District Tax Credit. I also brought up a resolution from the past, and the first whereas of this resolution from 2017 also gives a nice description. In 2004, a CRED district was established, and it says, in which a portion of the local income tax and Indiana retail and use, the sales tax, Indiana sales tax, and income tax generated within the CRED district that exceeds a base amount is deposited by the state of Indiana into the city's Industrial Development Fund. Here locally, we called those the CRED funds. And those were separate funds at the time. And I don't have a lot of expertise about this district.
But geographically, it was in downtown, right?
I think so. Like I said, I am
I think so,
not
too.
an expert on this district.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions? Councilmember Rallo?
Yeah, so this fund is fungible. We could put it in the general fund, or it's in the general fund, or it's considered to be, and we could spend it on whatever the need is. And does it accrue interest?
Yes, it's part of general fund balance that accrues interest.
Okay,
Doesn't accrue interest separately. We're not tracking that separately.
yeah.
That is just general fund interest.
Okay, good. Well, it's been parked there for a long time, so it's good to know. Thanks.
Councilmember Ruff?
Can you remind us of any statutory limitations there are on the use of the funds, if there are any?
Again, now we're getting into area where I'm not prepared to answer that question. All I know is that now that the area has expired, any general fund use is legal. It sounds like you're asking for what were the past legal uses. Yeah, I really couldn't find that information. I'd kind of prefer maybe an attorney to look into that with us.
Okay, thank you.
But, let's think about, it was the departments that are using it are street, parking, planning, engineering, and ESD. So it seems like it was infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Controller McClellan. All right, moving on. We have our first period of public comment, reports from the public. If you are a member of the public and you're interested in making a comment of items not on the agenda, you can make your way to the podium. Please state your name for the record and sign in, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes. If you are on Zoom and wish to make a comment, please use the reactions tab to raise your hand, or you can send a message to our Zoom host. And let's go ahead and start here in chambers. Please state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, Council. My name is Steve Boland. And this comment is called "Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in." I was elected and took office in 2004 when it was called at the time the Creed District was created. And for the first 10 years of my tenure, it was split between Districts 1 and 6. Second 10 years, it was entirely in District 6, and now it's again split between Districts 2 and 6. There was am I allowed to speak on this issue?
Yeah, I think because it's on the agenda. Councilmember Kulik, it's not legislation, but it's on our agenda.
It's just
if we can
information
pause
to fill in, but if you would like me to defer to another meeting, I could, but I just thought I'd fill in some background for you that you couldn't answer.
Yeah.
So
With items of legislation, the reason why you don't have folks commenting on items of legislation in this public comment period is because there is a designated public comment period for that item of legislation, whereas after this report, there was no public comment period. So I'm going to pull up your public comment rules, but I think it would be allowable since there was no public comment period attached to the report.
We need to clarify legislative agenda rather than just say agenda.
I think that you're right. I think that we do need to have that clarification, and I am good with. I don't think that it specifies. I'm looking at the rules for making public comment right now. I don't think that it specifies, and I think that I'm good letting it go because it's not a period, like, it's not a legislative piece that we would ever have a period of public comment on. If other folks are good with letting that go, we'll let that go, and then we will work on clarifying that point in our agenda. Does anybody have an objection to that? Okay, great. Why don't we restart the 3 minutes for Mr. Boland, because that was an interruption.
Much obliged. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
As I was saying, it was oddly called the Creed District, even though it looks like CRED. And for most of the time, if you go back to previous meetings, you'll see that that's how they referred to it. At any rate, the point was that in 2004, for example, the Smallwood building, now the Avenue on College, was only being built. It had just been approved. That was a good example of an industrial site that needed remediation, and there were a lot of places downtown that needed it, and that's why they created the district. Then it was expanded a little bit later. But you will note that even though it was created back then, neither the Cruzan nor the Hamilton administration spent hardly any money from the district. And in fact, it was an objection I raised when the Hamilton administration moved to dissolve the fund and move all the money into the general fund, that they had never made an effort to spend the money the way it was intended, which was a benefit district, to benefit the district where the tax dollars came from. It's true with any kind of, it's basically a kind of a TIF district. So I strenuously objected to the removal of that money from special fund into the general fund, but Controller McClellan is correct that the money is now in the general fund. I think maybe the reason that she is having to report is because that was the one concession that council required of the previous administration, was to report on how that money would be spent. In 2023, I proposed, and in fact, it was the subject of a resolution that was unanimously approved by the council, that at least $5 million of that money be set aside for the purpose of creating a downtown circulator public transit, which is still an idea that I gather has a great deal of support. Maybe, I don't know specifically among the council, but in general, I know the current administration has spoken favorably about it. Councilmember Sari has as well. And if there is a reason why you had to hear this report tonight, it was probably that. At the very least, the circulator would fulfill the original intent of the Creed District, which was to help economically develop a distressed area. We all know that the downtown is much less economically distressed than it was 20 years ago. But it wasn't that way because of spending from the Creed District. It was substantially all but not spent in the 20 years it was had. And I don't think it's good to reward previous administration that simply said, well, if we just hold on to the money till the district expires, then we can do whatever we want with it. So I would urge you to accept the spirit of the report that was asked for and make sure that at least some effort is made to spend money in the area that it was collected in. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom, Attorney Kulak? Okay, thank you. Next in chambers, please state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Great. Thanks. My name's Greg Alexander. I really get a lot out of it when someone tries to explain their thoughts to me, so I just want to say how much I appreciate that. And recently someone was talking about the B line, and they told me something. It's so true and so central. They told me we can always bike in the car lane like we did for decades. And of course I agree. You know, I used to live on campus. I was on 7th Street all the time. I have been claiming a lane on 7th Street for decades. But my hindsight isn't so rose-colored. I remember drivers running stop signs in order to pass me on the uphill. When there were partial painted bike lanes, I remember constantly waiting for buses unloading passengers into those bike lanes. I remember fighting to get drivers on Indiana Avenue to stop at the stop sign when it was my turn to go. You know, I wait my turn, they don't want to stop. I remember fighting to merge with traffic where the bike lane ended. So I was one of the few, one of the proud. I was a young, fit, bold male cyclist. What's the point of building a facility just for us? You know, we're just a few and we don't need it anyways, you know. But that's the thing, it's not for me, it's for my wife. My wife is lazy, but she's willing to take an uphill. So long as there isn't a driver breathing down her neck the whole way, She will trudge along at 5 miles an hour, if that's what she can do. If she doesn't have to struggle to get started every time from a stop sign, every gosh darn block. She has almost no tolerance for traffic violence, aggression, beeping. She tried a few different routes, and before the 7 line, she simply couldn't do it. But now, with the 7 line and the B line, she can chain together an end-to-end route, low stress from her work, and she does it about half of days. It's a big deal for her. She can do downtown errands on her way home. She gets home earlier. She's happier. She's stronger. It's a big deal for my whole family. For Poplar's building construction, the engineering department has decided to completely close the 7 line between Grant and Dunn, but to preserve the car lanes without any restriction until November. Cyclists will be advised to ride in the car lanes, which means westbound cyclists are going to be advised to make a diagonal crossing across the intersection twice. That's the most dangerous way to interact with an intersection, and they aren't willing to restrict private automobiles in order to make that crossing safer. This is not a safe detour. It's not a comfortable detour for cyclists. For cars, there's no restriction whatsoever. Their priority status is unquestioned. Drivers will intentionally harass cyclists when they use that detour. You know that. I know that. You ride it a couple times, you'll know it. You will know it. That's not how we're going to achieve our stated transportation goals. This is what it looks like when they continue to prioritize drivers and just cyclists can just, I'm not going to swear. Thanks.
Thank you. Attorney Kulak, is there anybody who's come up on Zoom? All right, is there anybody else in chambers? That was like a false start that I just witnessed. All right, not seeing anybody else, we'll move on past our period of public comments to appointments to boards and commissions. Does anybody have any appointments to boards and commissions that they would like to make? Councilmember Zulek.
Thank you. I move to appoint Nicole Brown to seat C1 of the Fire Merit Commission.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Thanks.
We have a motion and a second on the table to appoint Nicole Brown to seat C1 on the Fire Merit Commission. That information did go out in a packet addendum this afternoon, and I'm happy to explain more about the Fire Merit Commission if anybody wants me to do that. Does anybody want me to do that? Councilmember, sorry.
Actually, just because when we had that conversation, there was a lot of other conversations that happened, and I have had questions about this from the public, so
Okay.
insofar as...
Okay. So last year, there was state legislation that created police and fire merit commissions, and those, there would be two separate, a police merit commission, a fire merit commission, and they would be automatically established on January 1st of this year, 2025, unless the legislative body with the department had a resolution prior to December 31st saying that they didn't want it. And last year, the police department decided that they didn't want it, and the Board of Public Safety was serving their needs with regard to that commission. But the fire department decided that they wanted to go ahead and try it. So I thought that I had that board pulled up already, but I didn't. So let me take a minute to get over to that page. The purpose and duties, the Fire Merit Commission establishes or administers policies based on merit for the appointment, promotion, demotion, and dismissal of members of the fire department. And so that is something that I think has generally been being done by the Board of Public Safety, but that just changes a little bit of process. And so that commission has 5 members, one of which is appointed by this body, 2 of which are appointed by the mayor, and I believe they have to be different political parties, and 2 of which are appointed by the department themselves. And Later on, we'll see a resolution that I have sponsored about changing or updating the board and commission assignments for our interview committees, but one of the roadblocks that we ran into was that our interview committees, which usually do appointments to our commissions, those assignments were set by resolution, and there was not time between the time that we were alerted as council member, like that I was alerted as president, like, hey, we need to do this appointment, for us to change that resolution, assign the Fire Merit Commission to one of our interview committees, and then have that interview committee interview and then recommend somebody, because the state wants those appointments made by March 1st. So Councilmember Zulik and I had looked through those applications, and that is why we are recommending Nicole Brown for that position. Does that help? Does anybody have any other questions about the appointment or anything? Great, seeing no questions, all those in favor of Nicole Brown being appointed to the Fire Merit Commission, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great. I want to say a big thank you out to Ms. Brown for her service, her willingness to serve, and I hope that the establishment of that commission goes really well, and I'll look forward to updates for how that is going. Do we have other appointments to boards and commissions? Team C, do you not have one for Commission on Sustainability? The packet had sustainability and status of children and youth, and I know that I heard the children and youth one was paused, but I wasn't sure about the Commission on Sustainability. What?
I'm looking at my colleague, Sydney Zulik. Do you have it up?
On behalf of Interview Committee Team C, I move that for the Commission on Sustainability, we reappoint Tara Dunderdale to seat C1 and Justin Vazel to seat C2.
Second.
Thanks. Great, thank you. We have a motion from Interview Committee Team C for the Commission on Sustainability for a reappointments. Are both of those reappointments?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council members? All those in favor on those two reappointments, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. And thank you to Tara Dunderdale and Justin Vassell for being willing to continue service on the Commission on Sustainability. Those are all the appointments that I am aware of to boards and commissions. And then the last thing that I wanted to then do was, in my role as president, is to officially create the fiscal committee. And so we talked about that last week in terms of those final decisions on what the responsibilities of that committee would be. And so the fiscal committee, at least for the remainder of 2025, will be Councilmember Piedmont Smith as chair, Councilmember Asari, Councilmember Rallo, and myself. And then the Budget Task Force, which is not a committee. The Budget Task Force is not subject to open door kind of stuff. It is a task force that works together with the administration. Will be Councilmember Asari and Councilmember Zulik. And so Councilmember Asari serves on both of those in both of those groups, and so he can be a bridge in between. Does anybody have any questions about that? Thank you to my fellows for their service. And now I think we are on to legislation for first readings. Councilmember, yeah.
Just based on my knowledge of the open door law, I don't think if you call it a task force, you can get out of being responsible for having open meetings.
Well, the mayor's administration set up task forces last year that were not open door.
Yes, and that I don't know much about those exact task forces, but I think if you are using your authority as president to create a separate governing body, that in and of itself is a committee. And if it walks like a committee, talks like a committee, it is a committee, according to discussions I've had with the public access counselor. So I want to just make sure you're aware of that.
Well, then I might, my understanding of that is that technically the task force is an administrative body that, like, we're working with the administration to make that happen. So is it about who declares it, or, because last year I do recall the president appointing members to task forces?
I think it has to do with the creation of a separate governing body that, you know, if this task force gives recommendations to the council, it is acting as a committee that, for its purpose, would be, you know, giving recommendations to the governing body itself. If you're splitting off members, putting them in a task force, that is the creation of a committee.
Councilmember, sorry.
Worth, I think I think it was affectionately called SWAT, the Stowers West Action Task Force, or whatever it's called. I mean, we did obey open door laws. I mean, so.
Did you?
Yeah, I mean, so.
Because I know the Hopewell one didn't.
Oh, is that right? I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know, but. I mean, we can retract the comments.
I'll retract. Well, how about this? Can I retract the budget task force right now, and we'll figure that out and do that again in March? Can we do that? Because I hadn't heard that concern come up before.
Yeah, and I think it's specific to my experience with a different governing body making a lot of committees, and in my discussions with the public access counselor about that.
Okay.
You know, his consistent interpretation of committees being a separate governing body has been that it doesn't matter what it calls itself. It matters, you know, how it acts and what it does and who has authority. So
Okay.
I think if you want to create the fiscal committee and hold on the concept of the task force tonight, that's fine.
That's what I want to do then,
Yeah.
so that then we can clarify how that group needs to be categorized.
Yes, and I do know
and/or
that
created.
there was a new, well, it's not new now, but an update to the open door law on citizens advisory committees. I'm not sure if you know, but if there is a citizens advisory committee made up of not more than one member of the governing body, and then any other person who's just a citizen, that body is not subject to the open door law. But in this case, it sounds like the task force would have two, so that's where my
Right.
concern would come in.
Okay. We'll work on that. I'm rescinding the budget task force. Do I have to officially cancel it right now? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. I wanted to ask a different question. I mean,
Okay.
a related question.
What's the related question?
My question is, what's so bad about having the budget task force have open meetings?
I think that it's not so bad. It's that it's just about staff overhead right now. Overhead. Yeah, it's just about overhead. Yeah, it's not about trying to keep anything like private or secret or anything like that. It's just about the overhead of how many like things need official notice and jumping through all those hoops of like, yeah. It's about staff time. That's what it's about. Yeah.
It may be, in this case, just a couple of thoughts. One, we specifically decided, we opted to create this structure within the resolution so that the mayor's office would take the lead on that side in the controller's office. And then the other side, though, is that I think this dual structure of creating our fiscal committee and this task force sort of necessitate one another, and they feed into one another. And so, I think so that we can really hit the ground running. It maybe is useful to just, because we're 2 weeks until we can meet again, right? So is that right? We don't meet next week? Yeah, so it's maybe worth doing it, because either way, because there's 4 people on the committee and then, a separate person on the task force, that essentially you would want those meetings to be open, because otherwise we'd be essentially having a serial meeting, right? So, so you'd want those meetings to be open. It's good. It is good. Any budget conversation we have should be open anyways. I just think generally, even if many of the task force conversations are going to be more about like feasibility of outcome-based budgeting and some of those things. I mean, those are things that the goal of doing outcome-based budgeting is to bring more people in and into our understanding of how we do budget, how it's formed, and to do it over a longer period of time. So, I don't see any issue with appointing this, regardless. I mean, and I think the mayor's office can deal with the, scheduling of and noticing of those meetings.
Okay. I wish that this had been brought up, not right now, because we've been talking about this for a little while now, and that was not something that was ever mentioned before. So, yes, Clerk Bolden.
Clarify for staff time noticing and keeping memos of your actions, and that actually falls on my office. So I would want to get some clarity in terms of what we're responsible for and what we're not, since we're currently, the clerk's office is actually publishing notices and handling those things and tracking council member attendance for those meetings as well. So, and if the concern was staff overhead, that actually wasn't raised with my office. So I don't really know kind of where and what council members are operating off of.
Yeah. I think that it would be better to wait on the task force to get clarity about that and how staff time works out with that. So in terms of procedure, I already stated the task force, so I can just unstate it. Can we just rewind and back up and eliminate that?
Are you asking?
I'm asking whoever might know the answer, and I have a feeling.
Yeah,
that
I
it's
guess
one
I'm
of-
confused by just saying rewind. I think maybe, you created the fiscal committee. I guess you also have authority to create and/or dissolve any sort of task force.
Yeah. Though I suppose the other thing is I could just leave it created and we just may or may not have a meeting in the next 2 weeks. How about that? I think that works out. We may or may not have a meeting of the task force in the next 2 weeks, but the fiscal committee is ready to go. And in terms of your comment, Councilmember, sorry, about how like intertwined these two things are, they're not necessarily that intertwined in the long run. So, yeah. All right, are we good? Attorney Kulak, does that?
Yes,
Okay.
that solves the
And
issue.
Clerk Bolden, does that also satisfy your concern with your staff time?
I actually didn't have a concern about my
Okay.
staff time. I was just clarifying that nobody had discussed it with me. And so you withdrew the appointment of the budget task force members for the time being? Is that what I understood, or no?
I kept them for now, and we're going to figure out how that needs to work moving forward. We're going to check with,
Okay.
yeah, because I considered that equivalent to essentially the Hopewell kind of task force, which was not, those were not open meetings. But if the Showers West were open meetings, I think then it's unclear as to whether task forces, like where they fall. So, all right, are we ready for first readings now? All right. I'm sure.
I move that appropriation ordinance 2025-02 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Great. We have a motion and a second regarding reading Appropriation Ordinance 2025-02. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Will the clerk please read?
Appropriation Ordinance 2025-02 to additionally appropriate from the opioid settlement funds for the Downtown Outreach Grant Program. The synopsis is as follows. This appropriation ordinance funds the Downtown Outreach Grant Program in the Opioid Settlement Restricted Fund and Opioid Settlement Unrestricted Fund for the Community and Family Resources Department for the year 2025 for $250,000.
Great, thank you. The second reading for that will be March 5th, and that will also serve as the public hearing for that appropriation ordinance.
I move that ordinance 2025-08 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2025-08, an ordinance reestablishing cumulative capital development fund. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance reauthorizes the municipal cumulative capital development fund for taxes assessed in year 2025 and payable in year 2026, and authorizes collection of property tax at the rate of $0.05 per $100 of valuation. I guess that would be 5 cents. Anyway. The fund may be used for the purposes set out in Indiana Code 36-9-15.5.
Great, thank you. And that will also be heard on March 5th.
On to second legislation for second readings. I move ordinance 2025-05 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2025-05 to amend the following titles of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding resident boards and commissions. Title 2.12, Boards, Commissions, and Councils. Title 2.19, Housing and Neighborhood Development. Title 2.23, Community and Family Resources Department. And Title 2.20, Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is sponsored by Councilmember Piedmont Smith and is a result of the work done by the Special Committee on Council Processes in 2024, which she chaired. It brings forward revisions to Bloomington Municipal Code related to 13 resident boards and commissions in order to update and clarify the duties of each entity, require an additional written report by each entity to the Common Council and the mayor, and to make other revisions which came up during the Special Committee's review of Bloomington Municipal Code and discussions with staff liaisons which served the boards and commissions referenced.
I move ordinance 2025-05 be adopted.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, would you like to introduce your ordinance?
Sure. I mean, I don't have much more to say than what was in the memo, but for the benefit of summarizing and refreshing everybody's memory. This ordinance comes out of work done by the Special Committee on Council Processes, which looked at a 2021 consultant study from Novak Consulting Group, which looked at the Novak Group looked at our boards and commissions and made some suggestions on how better to utilize them and structure them. And in looking at that report and looking at our municipal code, the Special Committee saw that there were some discrepancies, some old language. So we endeavored to look at the purpose and goal statement of the different boards and commissions, specifically the ones that are not statutory in nature. So the ones that are only reflected in Bloomington Code and not in state code. And we got input from staff liaisons and from the commissions themselves. And I had just put all this together and presented, well, The special committee, I should say, approved a set of changes in November by vote of the committee. And since then, there were a few little tweaks brought forward by the commissions themselves, by 2 commissions. And so what we have in front of us today is revised language for 12 commissions plus the Board of Housing Quality Appeals. And I should say, in addition to some clarification of purpose and duties, there's also ensuring that each commission and the one board will submit a written annual report to the mayor and the council, so that we, it was required already for some, but not for all, and we want to know what they're working on, so that was made sure to, we made sure to add that where it was missing. So that's basically it.
Great, thank you. I have an amendment to this, and I think the question is, should I move that amendment first, or should we have council questions first? Well, I'll go ahead and move Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2025-05 and pass the gavel to my vice president because I sponsored that amendment.
Okay, is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Stossberg, would you like to summarize?
Sure. So I just noticed when I was reading through it that there were a couple of additional things that I thought should be changed. So I'll just go through this amendment one at a time. The first one was under the Martin Luther King Jr.'s Birthday Celebration Commission. The Bloomington Monroe County Human Rights Commission was still being called just the Bloomington Human Rights Commission, and that commission had a name change. The second section refers to the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission, or CAPS Commission. I thought that the meeting language was just a little bit bulky in there, and so I just changed it to the commission shall meet monthly unless canceled by the commission with a minimum of 4 meetings per year, which doesn't change the content, it just changes the language a little. And then under staffing, clarifying that council staff will provide administrative support for just that regularly scheduled monthly meeting as opposed to additional initiatives from that commission. And then I had been in communication with Clerk Crosley and also Department Head Shatoya Moss about membership requirements for some of our commissions, and Director Moss indicated that it would be helpful to extend qualification for the Commission of the Status of Children and Youth and Status on Women to be members, residents of Monroe County, not just the city of Bloomington, and that kind of matches what it is right now for Commission on the Status of Black Males, and also the Commission on Hispanic and Latin Affairs. And so that is section 3. And then section 4 changes annual reports. There were those 3 commissions that specified the timing of annual reports in terms of what month. And so once again, in communication with Director Moss, changed those to just an annual report in writing instead of that extra onus on those different commissions to have a certain month deadline, and that leaves it up to them. And then there was just removal of the word "and" to make it align with the rest of that section. So, pretty minor. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Councilmember Stossberg on the amendment? Okay, we'll go to the public. Is there any public comment on the amendment to Ordinance 2025-05? Okay, we'll come back to you after public. I don't see anybody in chambers with a comment on the amendment. Anybody on Zoom?
Yes, actually, Jennifer Crossley has her hand raised.
Okay, Ms. Crossley? Please go ahead with your comment. You'll have up to 3 minutes. State your full name for the record.
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good evening. I am Jennifer Crossley, coming to you in my capacity as Deputy Clerk of Communications and Outreach. And I just wanted to thank Council President Stossberg for the amendment, because we would have really, those two commissions actually have really good applicants. However, the problem is, at first, hopefully that this amendment passes, but the problem was that they were being X'd out because they were members of the county. And so I just appreciate this, because we will be able to obtain and keep those quality candidates, and will help out these social community or commissions to better help our community. So I just appreciate this amendment, and I just encourage those of you to pass this through with flying colors. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay. Councilmember Asari, you had a question on the amendment?
Yeah, I have also have an amendment, a proposed amendment. I don't think it got sent around, but there's which I don't know if we can do later, but there's a broader section in 2.05, I believe, that says what the residency requirements are sort of across the board for boards and commissions. And so I do wonder if it's more appropriate, instead of singling out those two committees, to just make this the residency requirements across the board for all boards and commissions.
I'm not interested in doing that as part of my amendment. So,
I mean, I have a separate amendment, but I'm just saying for the good of the order that, you know.
Any feedback on that from other council members? Councilmember Rollo?
Well, I think it might have been discussed in the past a bit, but I trend to not have a broad brush, because there are specific commissions, boards and commissions that have sort of their attention directed to the city. Other ones duplicated in the county, actually, environmental or sustainability and so forth. And so I think I support a case-by-case basis, actually, for the review, and not the broad brush approach, but I appreciate Councilmember Asari's question about it.
Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Stossberg.
I guess I just want to add to that one of the reasons why I kind of picked those two specifically is because, like the Commission on the Status of Black Males and the Hispanic and Latin, I don't have the full name in front of me right now, commission, they kind of deal with very specific population groups, and very specific concerns of specific population groups. And so because of that, I felt like it was appropriate in those cases to expand to the whole county, because Bloomington is the largest urban area, and so in terms of serving specialty groups with things that we do, we might attract that broader audience in a different way than potentially other commissions. And so that's the reason why I decided to expand that in those two commissions, to make them, line up accordingly. And I don't think that more broadly, I guess I just agree with Councilmember Rollo in terms of that, looking at each one individually instead of having a broad inclusion of membership across the board for everything, and looking at it individually.
Are there any other questions or comments from council members about the amendment? Okay. Seeing none, do we need to do a roll call vote? Okay.
Yeah.
Clerk Bolden, could you please call the roll on Amendment 1?
Councilmember, let's try this again. Councilmember Ruff,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Strasburg,
Yes.
Daley,
Yes.
Zulik,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Asari.
Yes.
All right, and Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2025-05 passes. I'll return the gavel to Council President Strasburg.
So now we are back to questions on Ordinance 2025-05 as amended. Are there questions from council members?
Is there another amendment?
Discussing, I mean, so I had proposed to change, I mean, I can introduce it to give us a chance to talk about it. So motion to introduce Amendment 2 to whatever the thing we're talking about is.
Yep, so I believe that was a motion to introduce Amendment 2 to Ordinance 2025-05. And then it was seconded. Councilmember Asari, would you like to? I see it up on the screen there.
Yeah, this was, I mean, and, you know, I'm not particularly wedded to this, but when a different approach than what Councilman Morello said, but just sort of saying, you know, we do run into this question of whether or not we want people to be residents in Bloomington, or their primary activities to be in Bloomington, or their employment to be in Bloomington. We do have this waiver already within this section of code that says that if somebody is an employee of the city, that we can waive that if they're going to be appointed. And so my thinking was that, you know, you could just make this broader and just say that anybody who lives in Monroe County or who has primary employment in the city is eligible for appointment. Doesn't limit groups or appointing committees or bodies from, you know, having a preference for who they're going to appoint. But at least this way, you never run into the issues of having to, you know, we don't have to ask this question every single time we get to an appointment. So.
Okay, are there questions? Councilmember Zulik? Questions first. Are there questions? I have a question. How do you propose that we determine primary place of employment? Because we can determine address relatively easily, but how do you propose that we determine employment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, that's a great question. I assumed we would just take people's word for it. They say, you know, they work at Baxter, and we'd believe them or something. But you're right. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know.
Okay. Are there other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Would this allow residents who live in Monroe County but outside city limits? Wait.
So it would allow
Primary place.
It would allow two types of folks.
Okay, let's say they live in Bloomington, but their primary place of employment is Adobe, you know, in California.
Sure.
But they work remotely.
That's right. They'd be fine because they live in Bloomington. So anybody who's a resident is already eligible.
Yeah, because there's an
That's
or
not
up there.
how I read
Yeah,
that.
because there's an or, so it's any individual who resides in Monroe County or any individual whose
okay.
primary place of employment. Yeah. Yeah, are there other questions? All right, we'll go to the public for comment on this then. So it's comment on Amendment 2 to Ordinance 2025-05 to expand residency. Is there anybody in chambers who would like to make a comment? You can make your way to the podium. Is there anybody online on Zoom? You can. Okay. I think we're back to council then for council member comments. Councilmember Zulik, did you want to comment now?
Yes, thank you. I'm a fan of this mostly because I think it encourages buy-in into our city community. There's quite a lot of people who might like to live in Bloomington but can't because they can't afford the prices of housing. And I think that by opening up all of these boards and commissions to the county instead of the city really encourages people's investment in Bloomington prospering. That's all. Thanks.
Councilmember Daley?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think this makes serving our city, on boards and commissions more inclusive. It's more welcoming, and I think we would have a greater possibility of diversity and getting a greater pool of talent and brains and passion. I know sitting on some of these interview committees before, we've had to throw out some applications because they didn't meet the resident requirements. They were in the county but not in the city, and there were some really strong candidates that we couldn't consider because of it. So I support this. Thank you.
Are there other comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
I wish I had more time to think about this, but my initial reaction is that it does mean something to be a resident of the city of Bloomington. You elect us, and we choose people to serve on our commissions to advise the city government. And I don't know, I mean, it all kind of factors into annexation and being part of the city and having a voice in your government. And I think in most cases that should be restricted to people who live in Bloomington. I think, as Councilmember Rallo said earlier, on a case-by-case basis, we could consider expanding it to people living outside the city limits but in the county. But in general, I think they should live in the city, so I'm opposed to this amendment.
Are there other comments? Any other comments before I go? Councilmember Rallo?
I'll put my 2 cents in. I think there are arguments on both sides. I'm trying to think of the potential implications that I might be missing here. I think that Councilmember Piedmont Smith made a kind of a compelling reason to be skeptical. I appreciate my colleague bringing it forward, though. It's something I'd like to explore further. But I think I'm going to oppose. Thanks.
Are there other comments before I go? All right. I'm very concerned about this, actually. I don't have such a hard time with individuals who reside in Monroe County and selectively opening up different boards and commissions potentially for that. But I really have a problem with opening up boards and commissions for anybody whose primary place of employment is located within city limits. I think that it opens up all kinds of complication for how we verify that. And if people then change employer, I think that that ends up being really complicated, and it would mean that they would potentially have to be removed from a commission if then they didn't have a new employer within city limits. And I think that that would just be a really extremely big headache. And I also share Councilmember Piedmont Smith's concerns generally about the fact that, we serve residents of the city of Bloomington, and our boards and commissions advise us in that service. They are the ones that elect us, and so I think that should mean something. So, yeah, it's the primary place of employment part that is going to make me vote no on this amendment. Are there other comments? Oh, Councilmember Rallo.
So unless I'm missing something, I mean, we're, of course, a regional employment center. So people come from Lawrence County to Bloomington to work. So theoretically, we're expanding, and not just at the county, but to the entire region of potential commuters, just to consider.
Councilmember, sorry.
I mean, I agree with the sort of tension here. I think like but on the other hand, though we're elected by people in the city, it's not only people in the city who use the services and benefit from them, who ride our roads and walk our sidewalks and park in parking lots and all the type of things that boards and commissions have some say in. So I can't imagine. But this is really, to me, it's just a difference in sort of. What we might think of as like a policy mechanism here. Like, to me, my general approach is rather that you legislate the exception, and I think that the exception is more narrow than the sort of, status quo. Whereas the other approach that colleagues are advocating for is the other way around, that there may be a few cases where you want to make it more broad. But I'm just always like, you want to create the legal structure so that we don't have to if later we run into this exact same thing that we're running into with what do you call it, the two commissions that we've just amended a little bit, you don't want to have to rehash that. You want to be able to allow that to happen when it needs to. And this is not saying that you will appoint people from Lawrence County. It's saying you could, if there's a good argument to do so. It gives the body that appoints them the ability to do as they see fit. And so I'm always just, my approach is just like you give people the tools necessary to make the things happen that you'd want to see happen potentially. So, but like I said, I'm not like, particularly one way or another, but I mean, I think it's a generally good idea on the basis that Councilmember Zulik brought up as well.
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I wanted to say I'm not ready for this decision, and I understand we will be voting on it, but I think I do not know what I think about it, so then I will not vote for it tonight, but that does not mean that I am yes, I just am not sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I would like to give the clerk's office a chance to respond to this.
Thank you. In general, if you all are proposing a change to code that's going to have a direct impact on the staff for the clerk's office, I really wish that you would actually have that conversation in public setting, because we should be talking about some of these things. We already verify residency when you have applicants who are coming in to make sure that they live within city limits, because a lot of addresses actually say Bloomington, but they're not actually within the corporate boundaries of the city. Similarly, if you add an employment requirement, again, that's something that can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done in any way, shape, or form. But I do know that that would require something along the lines of seeing pay stubs or a letter from an employer on letterhead or something else, and you would want to verify it every 6 months to a year to make sure that people are still working within the city limits. Again, this is not something that cannot be done, but it is something that would have to be done with some careful consideration about how much staff time and resources it would take. We do have a new position handling boards and commissions, but that job is huge already. Do we want to add another layer to that? I don't know. I haven't really looked at it with that eye toward it and didn't start thinking about it until tonight while you were discussing it. I don't have a preference. You all will make whatever decisions you make, but I do want you to think about those things while you're making your decisions.
Thank you for that reminder to the clerk's office involvement in this. Are there other comments from council members? Councilmember Ruff.
I think I'm where Councilmember Rosenbarger is.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other last comments before we vote? I just want to say for the record that they're actually in two separate physical spaces, just to really clarify that. Clerk Bolden, would you like to call the roll, please, on Amendment 2 to Ordinance 2025-05?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
No.
Piedmont Smith.
No.
Strasburg.
No.
Daly.
Yes.
Zulik.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
No.
Asari.
Yes.
Ruff.
No.
Okay, thank you. That fails 3-5. All right, and now we are back once again to ordinance 2025-05 as amended by Amendment 1. So now we're back to council member questions regarding the original ordinance. Are there any questions about the original ordinance? Okay, I have one. So there were a few different places, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, where I feel like the scope of the different commissions was reduced in various ways, and I just want to verify, like, in terms of, reducing those responsibilities, like, you spoke with the commissions about that, you spoke with the staff liaisons, like, you communicated all of those things, and that all of these, like, reductions in scope are things that are either being done in another way or already were not being done by these commissions.
Yes, I did communicate with the staff liaisons, and they communicated with the commissions. In one or two cases, I may have communicated directly with the commission chair, but it was mainly through the staff liaisons. Is there a particular one that you're concerned about?
I'm not necessarily concerned about any of them. I just noticed in terms of, like, powers and duties, there were lots of things that were, like, crossed. So I just want to make sure that all of those changes, like the boards and commissions are all okay with all of those changes, and that if there was any concern about, eliminating any of that stuff, that it like those concerns were raised in terms of those responsibilities either being shifted to some other party, probably staff, or just not being done at all.
Well, in a couple of cases, especially like the Environmental Commission, there were duties that were actually not something a commission could legally do. It was something only the executive branch could do, like enter into grant agreements or hire people or, secure laboratory facilities and things like that. So they hadn't done that in decades. And I actually did have a meeting with the Environmental Committee chair and the staff liaison, and they agreed, yeah, this is not relevant anymore. So that's the biggest one where there was a big reduction in the number of items. But all of them did go to the liaisons directly via email, each of these.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there other questions on this? Okay, I guess we can go to public comment then for this item of legislation. So if you are interested in commenting on ordinance 2025-05 as amended, make your way to the podium. Please state your name for the record, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand using the raise hand function, and or you can send a chat message to the host, and we'll go ahead and start here in chambers.
Good evening, Madam President. This is Christopher Rimji from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. And tonight's legislation, I think, is a step in the right direction for boards and commission reform. I think requiring the annual report that hopefully includes in that annual report how many times that these entities met. We need to know what the boards and commissions are doing or not doing. And I think that's the important thing as we attempt to consolidate some of these, maybe sunset a few of them as well. And, not to add more work for Ms. Crosley, which I'm about to do, but on some of the status ones, have we thought about making some joint efforts with the county in the same way we did with the Human Rights Commission? I think it adds more gravitas to those. I think they affect the county just as much, and I don't want to add purse strings to the county's budget on this, but I think having their buy-in on some of these, multiple of these commissions would be the step in the right direction. I just want to say I really appreciate the work of the Council Committee on Processes, and I think it shows that there is still work to do on boards and commissions and to make them effective and really something that the council and the executive body is using and not just time that staff has to spend. I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody who's raised their hand on Zoom?
Yes, Dr. Justin Vassell is on Zoom.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to our Zoom guest. If you could make sure to please state your name for the record, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Justin Vassell. I am the current chair of the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. And I just wanted to, just to start off, let me just, applaud the work that the Special Committee on Council Processes has done in regards to these changes, or at least specifically the changes on the Commission on Sustainability. Throughout this process, right from the very beginning, we were very involved, as was our staff liaison. And throughout the process, we were able to provide input, we were able to provide feedback once these changes started to take shape. And just having that level of transparency and that level of engagement with the special committee was very much appreciated. So I wanted to start by commending them on that. Second, I wanted to inform council that the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability does support the changes in section 2.12.100, which discusses our commission. Back in December, we passed resolution 2024-01, which specifically supported the language that you see before you today, and that was a unanimous decision from the commission. So these are really changes that we've sort of been discussing among ourselves for a couple years within the commission, and having a vehicle to actually take some of those ideas and actually get them into the code will allow us to work more efficiently and really work with more focus going forward. So just wanted to make sure council was aware of our support for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's move here back to chambers. Please state your name again for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Steve Nolan. As the chair of a now former commission, I want to reiterate, first of all, that here's another piece of legislation where there's an opportunity to actually invite the commissions that were affected to speak during the formal deliberation in council. And while I'm glad that Mr. Vassell spoke, I think any commission that was in this legislation should have been invited to this meeting and asked for their opinion. It's a fundamental, if you're talking about the fundamental establishing language that creates a commission and the commission exists, they should be consulted. More importantly, though, I'm sort of grateful that Amendment 2 did not pass. I don't think it was ready yet, and I think we really have to think seriously as a city about what it means to be in the city if we can open up membership to these important boards and commissions to any resident anywhere, if it doesn't matter where you live. That's actually the argument that some people have made for annexation. That's kind of the whole point behind it. But while we're at it, first of all, finally, I'm glad that the Special Committee on Council Processes exists. It shouldn't be special. It should be made permanent. I hope that an administration committee will come out of it that's permanently standing. But I did want to plant a seed for future changes for the sake of making clearer. One of the reasons that the previous administration commissioned the Novak report was because they complained that there were too many commissions and boards. But another thing that could be done is we could officially define the terms board and commission. I would gently recommend that a commission be something that is a sort of an optional body that a city can create, and a board be defined as something that's statutorily required, just to clean up and make a distinction between terms that have otherwise been thrown around. We have the Council on Community Accessibility. We have some commissions that begin with the word Bloomington arbitrarily. I think that also should be changed too. The Bloomington Commission on Sustainability can call themselves that still, but in code, the word city should be dropped because it implies perhaps a status that the other commissions don't. So little things. I'm very encouraged that you're taking this first step, and I hope that there are more changes to Title II coming, but I want to suggest that small change or something for the special committee to consider. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Attorney Kulak, do we have other speakers on Zoom?
Yes, Jamie Scholl.
Good, wonderful. Please state your name for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. It's nice to be here this evening, and thank you so much for all of the work and time that you spend on making things better for us. In regards to this previous legislation, I want to speak to that in regards to living within the city and living outside of it within the county. I moved to the Bloomington area whenever I was not quite 10 years old and lived out in the county, far out in the county, up until the time I graduated high school. Since being an adult and moving back, I have lived in the county, near the city, near some of the areas that were looking to be annexed on the east side, and then many years now within the city. And I can say there is a great difference of perspective from being in the county and being in the city, even though the resources are used by both. Being currently a member of the Commission on Sustainability and previously on Jack Hopkins' Social Service Grant Committee, I know that the city serves both the county and the city. So I would like to make a proposal that I'm not sure if it was spoken about yet. And that is for those commissions and boards that are the city and do not have an equal representative in the county, that we may consider designating a seat or two for county residents that are not necessarily appointed by someone in the county. That way we would know how our actions may affect those in the county, but also get the perspective of those in the county about how things work within the city. I think that could stimulate some good insight and discussion for each of the commissions and boards. Thanks for your time, and I'll give the rest back to you.
Great, thank you. I don't see anybody else here in chambers. Is there anybody else on Zoom? Okay, wonderful. Back to council then for any comments on ordinance 2025-05 as amended. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I just want to mention something I forgot to mention when I was summarizing, and that is that for the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission, there is in this ordinance a change in the number of members. It would move from 11 members to 9 members. And that was largely because we were having trouble filling that commission.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there other comments? Councilmember Rallo.
Just to respond to our 2 comments tonight, I think an invitation, it was posted notice that we were having this, I think, at this meeting. I think a number of committees, boards and commissions were aware. I certainly informed the Sustainability Commission about that. But in any case, just to be clear, all commission boards and commissions were consulted and played a role in this product, number one. Number two, I think that including members of the people outside the city limit living in the county has merit, but I think that that is probably a discussion for another day. Maybe as the need arises or attention, maybe as we continue hearing from commissions and reviewing them in the future, we can add additional seats to include county members. So, and we already have that in some cases. So just wanted to say that that's comments well taken, and I think we should continue evolving this as we go forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Are there other council member comments? Councilmember Daly.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Councilmember Rallo. I agree. I hope that we do revisit the issue. And thank you, Ms. Scholl, for your comments. I think if we're going to have county members on some commissions, then it should be all. I think it's worth having a bigger conversation. And, you know, I could change my mind on the issue depending on certain arguments, but I'd like to have that conversation rather than just kind of feel that it was thrown at us at the last minute. So let's carry on with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other council member comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Just want to thank the other members of the Special Committee on Council Processes for their help with this. And those are Council members Flaherty, Asari, and Rallo.
Thank you. I have a small comment to make. I'm really glad that Mr. Bashel from the Commission on Sustainability is online to hear this, because I noted this when I was reading through it, but I was like, I'm not going to bring this up right now. But I was really pleased with the addition of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals within that. And I also wanted to make sure to I wanted to ask this question, and I didn't know if anybody here would have the answer, but I'll make it as a statement that University Elementary School students, I think in 5th and 6th grade, but certainly in 6th grade, are required to do an end-of-year project based on the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And so in reading this through, of course, that was brought to mind because I had 2 kids that had to choose goals and choose projects and have outcomes, talking about outcome-based budgeting, actually have outcomes related to making a difference with those goals. And I just hope that there's some, that I guess these 2 parties get together so that the Commission on Sustainability realizes that University Elementary School has this initiative and this project, and that in turn MCCSC and University Elementary School, because there might be other schools besides just University that does this, uses the Commission on Sustainability potentially as a resource for students. Students doing those projects usually have to find a professional in the field to interview, to talk to about what it is that they're doing, and I could just see some connections potentially being able to be drawn between those. So I hope that that can happen, and I'm just pleased with that addition. So thank you. Any other last comments before we vote? Wonderful. Will the clerk please call the roll then on ordinance 2025-05 as amended?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Strasburg,
Yes.
Daley,
Yes.
Sulik,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Asari,
Yes.
Ruff,
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that passes 8-0. Moving on.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I was plugging in my computer. I move Resolution 2025-02 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 2025-02 to update the established interview standing committees. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution is sponsored by Councilmember Strasburg and updates the Standing Interview Committee board and commission assignments. It also provides guidance for handling future changes to city boards and commissions. Note, this resolution was changed after its distribution in the legislative packet, but before its reading and discussion this evening to correct grammatical errors in the whereas clauses and typos.
I move Resolution 2025-02 be adopted.
Thank you. And since I'm the sponsor of this, I will pass the gavel over to Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Thank you. Councilmember Strasburg, would you like to present this legislation?
I would, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, with regard to the Fire Merit Commission, we kind of realized that the interview committees that we have, A, B, and C, were actually created by resolution and were assigned the commissions that they interviewed for by resolution. And so that was done in 2022 by resolution, let's see if I can find it, resolution 2202. And so in recognition of the Fire Merit Commission, in recognition of the consolidation of Traffic Commission, Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission, and Parking Commission, creating the Transportation Commission, in acknowledgement of the CIB, I realized, like, okay, we need to refresh this to make sure that our interview committees are interviewing for all the boards and commissions as they appropriately need to. So the slightly modified version that got sent out this afternoon fixed just a couple of typos, and then a couple names of commissions. As it was pointed out, there are differences in the names between city code and the resolution 2202, and also then on board. In some cases, there are actually 3 separate names for them. So the ones that got sent out this afternoon are as they appear in our code. And then the other kind of notable change that I made was there was not a legislative path for any changes to be made to these committees without a new resolution. And so I created a path that allowed whoever is president at the time to assign new commissions to an interview committee without having to redo the resolution every time. But I also advised that in the year following elections, this is redone to accommodate for any changes that might happen. So I will take questions.
Are there any questions from council members? Great. Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Are there any questions regarding Resolution 2025-02 from the public? Anybody on Zoom?
No one has their hand raised, no.
Thank you. All right, we can come back to the council for any final comments before the vote. Councilmember Strasburg.
I'll just comment and say I hope the silence means that everybody is in support of this kind of bookkeeping procedural resolution. So thank you.
And I will just extend my thanks to Councilmember Strasburg for bringing this forward and getting us on track with some of the changes in our commissions. All right. I don't see any other hands raised, so Clerk Bolden, could you please call the roll on Resolution 2025-02?
Councilmember Strasburg.
Yes.
Daley.
Yes.
Zulik.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Asari.
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
And Piedmont Smith.
Yes. That resolution passes with a vote of 8-0.
Great. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our legislative session for tonight, so now we're into the additional period of public comment where people can speak once again on items not on the agenda. If you spoke during the first general period of public comment, you may not speak during this one. Of course, if you spoke during legislative items, you may speak again. If you're in chambers and wish to speak, please make your way to the podium and you'll have up to 3 minutes. And if you're online, please raise your hand using the reactions tab, or you can send a chat message to the host. And we do have one person making their way to the podium, so state your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening again, Madam President. This is Christopher Emge from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to sort of piggyback on your comments on the Plan Commission that met last week that looked at UDO changes. We had a kind of a larger discussion, I think, going back to the Rialto incentive changes that you voted on 5-4, and that larger affordability question on the role of council and the role of city and what is working and what is not that need to be addressed. And I think the Plan Commission had concerns about their role in this. I mean, they're responsible for zoning, they're responsible for land use and aesthetics. Are they responsible for land policy? And I think that these are questions that I think need to be sort of asked. I mean, we've talked about some other roles of council recently quite a bit, and I think the Plan Commission and that particular piece needs to be looked at. Are we putting housing projects together based not based on the land use, the aesthetics of the zoning, but based on that affordability that's kind of cut in there? And are they making sort of judgments that maybe that's not their role? And I think Killing Hansen from Hand has made some really good presentations on this, and I think I've learned a lot. And I think we just need to take a fundamental look on what we're doing on housing policy, specifically with incentives. I know during that meeting, GenPro BEDC discussion, we've had a working group on the CDO changes the county has put together with some developers and some recommendations. But what avenue can we have to sort of look into that and something that makes sense for developers and makes sense for the city that's going to be effective? The road is paved with good intentions. No one's questioning anybody's intentions. These policies are worth trying, but are they working? And I think we've had that discussion 2 weeks ago when you met, and fundamentally, I think sometimes we're not quite understanding the same things I am. I'm left kind of shaking my head, but then I'm not an expert on housing policy either, so what I know may not be everything that I need to know. And I think having some very direct conversations on this, especially as we look at boundaries that might not be expanding here in the city, that we're going to have to look at some real fundamental ways to make this affordable that's going to be effective. The price of land sometimes is the price of land. There's only some things on the margins that government can do on this role, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at and really discussed as we move forward. I thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Attorney Kulak, is there anybody online with their hand raised?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Seeing nobody else in chambers and nobody else online, we will move on to the last item on our agenda, which is council schedule. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, March 5th, and we will hear Appropriation Ordinance 2025-02, which serves as a public hearing. And right now, I just want to go ahead and announce that there are 4 council members who have told me that they are unable to make that meeting, and council members must be in person at that to participate because of the appropriation ordinance being heard. So if any of the 5 that are left end up needing to travel or are ill or anything for any reason, please let us know that as soon as possible. The second thing that I wanted to make sure to note is the meeting on March 12th, which right now is a special deliberation session. I am considering recategorizing that meeting from a deliberation session to a special legislative session. And that would involve a change of notice. So just kind of be aware that that is something that I'm considering right now. And I think I have one. Oh yes, one more thing. There have been some council members who have expressed interest in being the council appointment to the newly formed Transportation Commission. We created that at our last regular meeting, and I've been in contact with the planning department, and they're expecting to have the first meeting of the Transportation Commission in April or May. So we will deal with our council appointment to that on March 26th. So for those folks who've already expressed interest, or if anybody else is interested in that appointment, that is an appointment that we vote on as a council. So we will need to appoint that as a body. And that is all I have. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Councilmember Zulik.
Just remind everyone that if you're planning on missing a meeting, you should also let the clerk know.
Thank you. Anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.